And gentlemen, please be seated, and we should start with our afternoon session. So first of all, a huge welcome to our guests and panelists here, and of course, welcome to you as well, ladies and gentlemen. So. Today we'll be talking about different creative aspects of placemaking process. My name is Igor Marko, and I'm an architect and urbanist. I was born in Czechoslovakia when it was still Czechoslovakia, but I'm based in London, and I'm running a practice which is dedicated to placemaking based in London. So I will just repeat. Our panelists are quite a, I would say, various bunch of amazing people here, and with very different background. And I have to say, when I was trying to kind of do my homework, I spent hours of going through the portfolios of work they've done. So amazing. So quite a lot of work. So well done. Anyway, so. And I'll be, of course, of course, it's something what I didn't say. I'll be chairing this this debate, and so I'll be the policeman here. So, and because this session is about interaction, and this is a conference, so I took a privilege to change a little bit of a format of how we're going to do it. So I already spoke to our panelists. So what we do, that I'll do a quick presentation or quick intro into topics, and then. Our panelists will do a very short presentation, and one by one, and I won't be interviewing them. They will just sit down, and we start immediately talk about things. So I'm really hoping for a more interactive approach, because that would be more suitable for our topic. So let me just do the quick intro. You have to excuse me, I'll be reading it because I had a really heavy lunch. And after heavy lunch, I usually elaborate a little bit more about things, and then I will be here maybe for more than 2 hours, So, okay, so as you can see from the composition of our panelists, placemaking is an umbrella for a multitude of methods and processes addressing economic, cultural and social aspects of urban environment. Naturally, many people would expect architects, planners, or urban designers to be frontliners to this placemaking debate. But I'm very glad that I'm the only one here, because placemaking is not only about architecture, and we'll be talking about very different topics today. So we will be talking about very different processes with very different people here, and many of these processes and initiatives and projects are primer catalysts behind many unique transformational changes which are making our cities more enjoyable, stimulating, socially inclusive, and of course sustainable. Placemaking is not only about the physical change of our living or working environment. It is about creating something far more valuable, which is extremely difficult to describe. It is a creation of a genuine and a lasting relationship between people and a place. Every relationship is tricky and unpredictable and very risky. And any mechanical and over-engineered approach is destined to fail. So therefore, we need to find the different models, how to approach different aspects of city building. Placemaking as approach is about creating places that have a capacity to evolve and adapt over time to the changing needs of our society. It combines research and practice and crosses the boundaries between different disciplines, from urbanism to cultural policies, socioeconomic strategies, and financing to branding and communication. But the only way how to describe placemaking is through the practical examples of work. And I would like to invite our speakers to show us a little bit more about what's really happening in their kitchen. And as I mentioned, that the format will be very quick, so that I asked them just to really make it very short. And we do it one by one, and then we go straight into our debate. So I would ask first Juan Carlos Beloso, and this is a part of the introduction. Juan is from Spain, and he's a founder of the Future Places, and his main topic, his main interest is city branding. So I would ask him to tell us more about this fascinating topic.
Well, can you listen to me? Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Igor. I think it was a very interesting introduction to the topic. I'm an economist, so I'm not a cultural activist. And I'm basically working on, as Igor explained, on place strategy and place branding. But in the end, and that's the title of my presentation, and let me put it here. When we talk about branding, and that's my main message is we're not talking basically, I think communication is important, but we are not talking about communication, we're talking about placemaking. And that's why I'm trying to explain and put some lights on the examples of Barcelona and a brief comment on Bilbao, which are probably the two most interesting examples in Spain. This is some of the basics we know, and we have seen in Pilsen. I go around the world trying to help places because they call me and they say, we are competing, it's a global world, we want to retain our citizens, we want to attract tourists, professional visitors, we need talent, we want the best talented professionals, we want investors, entrepreneurs, we need clients for our services and products, we need alliances, we want to bring events, etc. So it's clear that we all compete, big, small cities, nations, regions, destinations, tourist, cultural destinations, so we are all competing. And that's why, in a way, the concept of place branding is now a trending topic, I would say, in many places, although I think many people don't understand really what branding means, and I think we have a problem with the word brand. But that's another discussion. I think when we think about attractive places, and I would say, when we think about London, New York, Sydney, Barcelona, I could say Prague, I mean, what makes a place attractive? Because these are all attractive places, they have great brands, but what makes really a place attractive? I put some concepts here that I think somehow, when you look at successful places with the strong brands, attractive places, I think they all have some common elements. I think most of them, they have a clear vision, purpose, and a value proposition. They really, you know what they offer you, you know what to expect from a certain place. They all have, and that's also very important, a strong and distinctive identity and character. We could be talking, we will have the time during the debate, but identity and character is something absolutely important. And we've discussed about gentrification, we're discussing about many things that's happened in places that provide the risk to lose your identity and your character. And if you lose your identity, or if you don't think about the identity of a place, then you won't be distinctive anymore, and then you won't succeed. These are, I think, when we talk places, strong brands, they have attractive, high quality, innovative, and inspiring design and content. I think hardware and software, we need attractive design, but we need vibrant, dynamic, innovative content. These are places which are alive and vibrant. They are very dynamic. We'll see Barcelona, for example. We have things happening all the time. We have more than 150 festivals around the year. I think places which happen things all the time, people can experience different things. Places that provide opportunities, experiences for everyone, not just for tourists, for the citizens, for visitors, for entrepreneurs, for talented people. Places which are diverse, human, connected, and sustainable, balanced somehow. Places that are able to engage stakeholders and citizens with their place. And places which in the end have a strong and positive image and reputation because of all these things, but also because they can tell a compelling and emotional story around the place. So this is a kind of a list. I don't tell how do you do that, but that's more or less what I see from many places I've been around, which are, and when they call me and say, how can we improve the image of the place? And I say, and they say, well, what's the logo? When can I say, okay, let's forget about logos. I think, as I always say, actions speak louder than logos. I think we need to do things, we need to explain things, and that's about placemaking. So that's why I think branding and placemaking is absolutely closely related. No, very briefly, because we don't have too much time. Probably most of you have been to Barcelona. If not, you're welcome to come to the city. For those who are in Barcelona, we are very proud of our city. Although we lately listen to some things that we don't like about too many tourists, etc. But most people is engaged, people like the city. And we tend to think that people like Barcelona, apart from the partying and going to the beach and enjoying the city, which is probably one of the most attractive things that we city have, is because we have been able to develop an advanced and inspiring and cosmopolitan city, very creative, very dynamic, very human somehow. The size of Barcelona is not, we have 1.6 million inhabitants. It's not so large, but it's large enough to have all the cultural offering, education, etc., etc. And that's, for example, the last, talking about campaigning, no? The last concept we are working on Barcelona as an inspiring capital because of all the things I explained. I think the most important message for me is why Barcelona is a strong brand, why people want to come to Barcelona. I think one part of that is because we have innovative urban design and architecture. Here I have some examples on the urban design. You know, probably modernism, Gaudí. Gaudí is probably one of the most best-known architects and the most important attraction of Barcelona. You must know that Gaudí was very poor. And by his time, now people say Gaudí is a genius. But by this time, they say Gaudí, it was crazy. So he could only survive because there was a family, La Familia Way, you know, the Park Way, that supported him, but he died very poor. Now he's a genius. So sometimes you have to be innovative, creative, and crazy to do things in the cultural sphere or in any other sphere. But we also have like contemporary architecture, public spaces and cultural spaces. This last image is the market. We have incredible markets around the city which are not only innovative but very engaging with a lot of people using the market. So I think that that's one of the reasons why Barcelona is interesting is because of the urban design and architecture. These are one of the last projects. That's the design hub we just finished in Barcelona. That's a new building that is used as the office for the attention of new companies. So it's for the entrepreneurs. But again, it's about, this is the market. It's about design. It's about innovation. Barcelona is about design, innovation, and creativity. So it has always been like this. So this when we think about branding and identity, everything we need to do has to be inspiring, has to be creative, has to be innovative. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Barcelona. But it also has to be Mediterranean, because we are a Mediterranean city. It has to be designed for people to go around, to enjoy the city. We don't like to be inside the place. We want to be in the streets. And that's why we have good weather. We have to enjoy the place. No? So this is the kind of things you have to link when you think about the branding, the identity, and the making. So that's when I always explain that we have to understand the identity, the values, the attributes, and that have to be the leading inputs for the design of the place, on the physical, but also on the content. Also, another important thing, like I always try to explain, identity. You have to keep your traditions. You have to keep your culture. For example, preserving historical heritage. That's the new. That used to be our old hospital. That's the new jewel we have on modernism in Barcelona. It has become an international knowledge and cultural center. I will talk tonight about that. But we preserve the industrial heritage. This is a university in what used to be, it's now the innovation district. The art factories program, I don't have I don't have the time to explain, but this is a very interesting project preserving all the industrial heritage around the city for the creative people. Content, I talked already about festivals, events, so place branding and placemaking talking about the physical and the software or the cultural and the social events of the place. Obviously sports, so I think it's about place and content. If we think Bilbao, which is, I don't know how many of you have been to Bilbao. If not, I recommend you to go because it's an interesting place. 15 years ago, nobody wanted to go to Bilbao. It was an very industrial city, very depressed, very dirty, gray. So what they did is using cultural icons like the Guggenheim, which is called the Guggenheim effect. And many people is trying to reproduce this concept, but I don't think you can reproduce exactly the same concept in every place. But in this case, it worked. Because it was a catalyzer, as the Olympic was for Barcelona for transforming the city and bringing it back to the sea, this was transforming Bilbao. It's like an urban revolution through architecture and culture. And I think it's a good example. I don't have the time now to talk, but we can discuss about that. I think many places, if you think about Berlin, the first stage of the transformation of Berlin was physical. Then it came the software part of the city. So I think sometimes you need to change the place physically. And then I think Bilbao, for example, what is Bilbao now about? It's about architecture, it's about culture, but they are working on the innovation and the culture and the software part of the city. I think I don't have too much time, but I think this is a very good example of what we talk about, how to make a city attractive is by changing the place, by making it attractive from the physical and from the content part of the city, and communicating well. And that for me what's able. So the main message is every place has its own model. I go to places and they say, we want to do the same as Bilbao did. I said, you cannot do the same. You have to understand what's your identity. You have to understand what do you have. But you can use the examples to inspire your own strategy or your own decision. No? It's clear there is a close relationship between place branding and placemaking. And as I said, great places, they all have distinctive identity and high quality, innovative, inspiring design and content. That's my main message in 7 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions later probably. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuan. Very inspiring presentation. And I would just like to invite Daniel, that's over from New York, who is representative of quite exceptional, I would say, method. You know, it's a combining engagement, digital placemaking, and a participatory approach. You know, so I think there is all these ingredients are quite incredible, and I think that it's there is definitely something to look for the future. So Daniel, please, and of course I forgot to say that Daniel is the founder of the Wise City in New York. So please, Daniel, tell us more about what you do.
That's mine. That's not his. That's mine. Yeah. Who's putting the presentation on? Different presentation.
That's my name.
You can use it if you want. It's Wise as well. You can use it.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Hello. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to try to finish this in exactly 7 minutes. This is just to get conversations started. So I would love to chat with anyone who has questions later on tonight or tomorrow, or I'm going to be here in Prague until the 16th. So digital placemaking. We've heard about creative placemaking. There's various prefixes that you can attach to placemaking. I started this when I was working at Project for Public Spaces, which is a New York-based urban design firm. And they asked me to add in digital engagement in a way that preserves the way that they do placemaking, which is about community-centered, people-centered placemaking. So starting with the community and designing and visioning with the community. But I first want to just actually acknowledge kind of taking on from what Juan Carlos was just talking about, is like, where are we right now here in Prague? And there's actually sort of a special connection that I have. This is a photo here during Occupy Wall Street in New York City at Zuccotti Park. And there was this moment where I was seeing this line of police, surrounding the whole plaza, trying to stifle free assembly in this public space. So I, at the time, was working at Project for Public Spaces, and I wanted to investigate what was happening. And it reminded me of this essay that some of you might be familiar with. And so from Václav Havel's famous essay, he ends one of the sections saying, and do we not in fact stand as a kind of warning to the West, revealing to it its own latent tendencies? So what I'm trying to say here is thank you to the Aspen Institute for bringing me here. This is a culture and a place that I've always wanted to experience firsthand. And like Juan Carlos was saying, to me the question that I think you may want to consider is, what is a Czech placemaking? What is the wisdom that you have within your culture, given the types of leaders and inspiring poets and writers that you have, where you can contribute to the practice of placemaking in a way that the world needs, especially coming from the type of history that you guys are coming from. And so the type of placemaking that I advocate for in the Wise City is profoundly community-centered and bottom-up. And it's precisely for this reason, is that we keep forgetting over and over and over again that there are more of us than any of the oligarchs or politicians, and it's a working relationship. We get apathetic, we get disappointed, but we need to keep reminding ourselves that it's all of us together that are going to make a world where we can all live together in a more equitable way. So this is what I've mostly done. This is what it looks like. A lot of crowdsourcing, a lot of community asset mapping for master plans, for open space or public space, for transit corridors to build community through transportation, in more sustainable transportation. And I've learned a number of things doing this probably 20 times now in different cities in the US, and also in a couple projects in Sweden. And the basic thing that I want to share here is, again, so these ideas may be new here in the Czech Republic, but you have the opportunity, like people mentioned during this morning's talk, to, as it was opened, to maybe avoid some of the mistakes that we've made. So this is the chart of the hype cycle. And this pretty much happens with everything. So this may be happening now with placemaking. I was just in Moscow in the spring, and Jane Jacobs' famous book was just translated into Russian 2 years ago. So all of a sudden now, in Moscow at least, everyone's very excited about placemaking and Jane Jacobs. So there's this, peak of expectations, creative placemaking or something can solve everything, let's apply it to everything. But then of course it won't work if you believe in some utopia, as I think we all have learned from our different life experiences. So then you go into this profound disillusionment, and then you realize what works really well, and then you find out what actually is going to work. And this balance, or this sort of wiser place, is something that will be unique to each culture, to each context. It won't always be the same thing for every city or country. So again, this is a question for, I think, the mission that you have is, what is Czech placemaking? How can we make this ours? Now, this technology is very exciting. Big data, smart cities, want you to believe that technology can solve all your problems if you have fast enough computers and big enough data. But I think many of us are here to say that if you do that and you don't listen to people, and you replace listening to people with data, you are probably going to make the same technocratic mistakes that have been made every decade since the technocratic experiment has been going on. So the one thing, if there's one thing that you should remember from my talk, besides my inspiration of one of your celebrated poets, is that if you're going to be using technology in placemaking, only 10% of your effort should be about the shiny, exciting technology. The rest of your effort, 90% of your effort, should be about community organizing and the communications to build a movement or to build a campaign of people to get excited. So you, for example, you have a rail corridor that goes, through Prague, that there's speculation about how to use the rail corridor for what, increasingly privatized purposes or luxury development. It could also be a place that for everyone. It could be an addition to the commons here in this city. But if you're going to make that happen, the technology isn't going to fix it for you. It will help, and it may get you attention, but the hard work of organizing, that is one of the human endeavors, never goes away. If anything, it's more important these days in the face of all this sort of consolidation of power that we see. So that's really detailed. Let's see. The point of these two slides is, in placemaking, the primary approach of the old method is you start with a problem, you assume what the problem is, you then design, and then you talk to your neighbors or you talk to your community. And of course, you make too many assumptions, and people then don't like it, and then there's mistrust that ends up building up. And so the placemaking approach is starting with the community first and listening before you design, and then building a vision together collectively to then arrive at a proper solution. So, but the problem is, we end up in one way or another. How many different types of corruption are there? Too many to list. One of my favorite quotes here by Ivan Krastev is that transparency in politics is politics as management of mistrust. So with digital technology and open government ideas, it's also sort of this false belief that technology will fix government. We don't have to be involved. Let's just add open technology, and that will fix the corruption. But we already are seeing it doesn't work. If anything, it creates an illusion that the government is being transparent and friendly. So this was from one of Ivan's TED Talks. He ended it saying, from a quote from Goethe, that there is a big shadow where there is much light. So again, there's this sort of constant reminder of being cautious about how we trust technology. So just my last point here is the wise city approach that I've recommended and that I've come up with as a result of a lot of the work is to include open government visibility for all sectors of society, from elected officials to businesses, journalists, and then local residents and artists. But that's not enough. Based on these quotes that I just mentioned, I believe you also need the citizens, the local artists, teachers, residents, and journalists to be involved in art, or socially engaged art, that communicates within the citizenry why are we doing this, what's meaningful. And then you also need to add in citizen journalism, not mainstream journalism, but neighborhood-based journalism, so that you control the story. So if there's the rail project here, you have to write the story of what that's about. Don't let the media tell the story, otherwise you will lose, most likely. So those are my snacks to think about. And if you want to talk more, come and find me. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I really enjoyed the remarks, towards the smart city. I think we should really elaborate on that theme a little bit more, because I think we find quite a big difference between smart city approach and wise city approach. So I think that is something what we really need to talk about a little more. So I would like to invite Anne for the second time to go to the stage. And again, I'll do a quick introduction. So Anne Markussen is also from the United States, and she's a director of Arts Economy Initiative at University of Minnesota. And she's also a principal of Markussen Economic Research. I would I'll make it very short now, so please, Anne, just tell us little bit more focus on. Probably there will be a bit of a repetition from the morning session, but let's see.
Okay, is this on? Is this on? Yes, it is. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to say I'm also an economist by training, but I have been teaching for most of my career in schools of architecture in city and regional planning, where I teach economic development. So I'm going to focus on 3 questions that were posed by Igor to the panel, is that right, or by the organizers? So they gave us about 7 topics to cover in 7 minutes. I'm going to do these 3: convincing public leaders, project sustainability, and evaluating progress. Okay, so one question is how to convince mayors and other political leaders about creative placemaking. These are my best ideas. 1, invite them to go with you personally to an arts event. And pick the event carefully based on what you know about them. I always recommend theater because theater is such a powerful form, but just be careful what you take them to. 2nd, bring them to the neighborhood to meet your most inspiring art initiators and just have them talk one-on-one and observe the process, even if it's someone painting or building a structure or performing music. 3rd, bring a group of arts participants and art lovers to a city council meeting. I don't really know how open your meetings are, but to really be there in a very upbeat, wonderful way, try to interject something into the meeting, some request, and really use actually even artistic expression to raise the question. Next, create a coalition to elect arts-friendly leaders. In my Seattle City of Music update, which is part of my Otis report, which I'll show you in a minute, we found that the entire Seattle City of Music initiative was the result of venue owners and 90s musicians organizing politically to elect a music-friendly mayor. And finally, initiate a campaign to raise tax money for the arts. I don't know how that works in different places, but in my state, the arts advocates joined with the hunting people and the environmental people to put forward a constitutional amendment for 25 years to raise a 1% sales tax that would go to arts, wildlife, and clean water. And the people of Minnesota voted for it. And this has resulted in $50 million more for just arts and culture in Minnesota. So those are ideas about mayors. I'd love to hear other people's ideas about that too. The case study evidence for this is both in this wonderful paper I wrote, very short, because I was invited to speak before a meeting for mayors from around the United States about how to support cultural entrepreneurs. It was a wonderful, wonderful day and a half where I got a chance to meet a lot of these mayors and interact with them, and they asked me to write a briefing. It's just really short. And the other is this city creative industry strategy piece that I wrote for the Otis Creative Economy Report, the 2012 Los Angeles Economy Impact Statement, and it profiles Seattle City of Music and the Silicon Valley Creative Entrepreneur Project and our artist centers. Okay, you have to just tell me when 7 minutes is over and I'll stop. Okay, sustainability. I think I already said something about this morning, but I really think that if you take the long run view, and I showed you some failed flagship projects, you have to seriously consider how are we going to fund this operation, how much can be earned income, how much can be contributed income, and you have to really map that out ahead of time. And that's why going small and also having projects that are not just one-off, but are year-round and meant to be sustained in the long run are preferable, I would say. Encourage smaller scale dedicated spaces like theaters, artist centers, live work or studio buildings that have entrepreneurship built into them. And avoid designating cultural districts. This is just quite a fad in the US. Some cities and states are trying to impose cultural districts, like map them, and I'm totally opposed to this. Actually invoking Jen Jacobs, because I believe that that implies that every place else is not a cultural district, and I think that's just totally incorrect and wrong. So I am instead working with the idea of a mosaic, which was Jane Jacobs' description of New York City in the 1950s, that there was Chinatown and Little Soho and Little Italy, Soho and Little Italy and Greenwich Village, and they all had their distinctive character, but people were invited to move across the porous boundaries and to experience all these very different ways of putting everything from cuisine to arts events together. And finally, just building in participation by community members. So I think this is just a very key thing. I hope we can talk about it a lot more, because I think most consultation processes are run by professionals who are really not part of the community. And even most arts projects, public art projects, are done by artists who are not from the community. And if we really want to have, community buy-in, we need those artists to be, and those people initiating the effort to be really from the community. And that takes a lot of really effort to make that happen. And I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to talk about this again. But I do think that this question of evaluation is very important for all of us, and we need to learn from each other's projects. And one of the wonderful things about convincing the NEA to let us study completed cases of creative placemaking is we learned an enormous amount. We learned things we would never have anticipated, and we were able to deliver those as kind of a framework for creative placemaking in the US. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I would like to invite David Kaspar to tell us more about what he does. David Kaspar is a cultural manager and arts producer, and he's this amazing multitasker. When I always read his portfolios, it's like, how can you manage to actually run all these things at once? So tell us more about how you do it.
Hello, good afternoon. I had to laugh when Anne was telling her recommendation to invite a group of artists to the political meeting. I did it once, and I had some very fun experience, and I can tell you later. We can share these ideas. I'm in a little. I call it a schizophrenic position, but maybe it's you can call it bottom-up position as well, because on one side I am a manager responsible at the moment for creating a Prague cultural strategy with it, which is a quite upper approach to the culture in the metropolis. And on the other hand, I am art manager and producer of art and culture in localities, and I run this festival together with Jirka Služenko, and I run these venues on a suburban areas of the city of Prague. And I was thinking maybe trying to make a connection between these two layers, and I have a story, because I heard it's good to tell stories. So I will try to demonstrate like 11 keywords on a story of a street for art festival on the last year, and I'll do that to try to give a meaning to these quite general words that we know, and I try to give them a meaning. So, okay. First, if you're talking about creative placemaking, find about the place. Just map it as much as possible. Go in there, look behind the corners, make notes. Just map the place and find about as much as possible the connections, the distinctions, distances. Etc. It's just very necessary, and the context. Don't forget the people. Find out as much as you can about the people. This is the result of a community monitoring. We did a monitoring of communities. We know who they are, why they call themselves communities, who are the leaders, and where they are seated. And we have mapped them, and we have pointed on the map. And so we really have a connection to the software of the place. Point out the problem. You have to do that. If you want to change something, you have to point out the problem. This is the worst space at the district of Blackbridge. It's an area on the suburbs of Prague, and it's definitely the worst place I've seen in many times. And it's just next to the metro station. So it's in a transit area where all the people who live in the area, it's about 40,000 people, they all pass by this place. So it's very important for the city infrastructure. Start with the action. If you want to change something, you just have to start with the action. There is no one else who will do it instead of you. If you know how to do it, you just do it. That's all. That's about it. So we went for it. We start to actually working to change this place. And we made it visible. We were able, in a very small scale of time, with very small amount of money, make a big change. And only by visualizing this change, we could open the eyes of a lot of people who would be passing by the place like that for many years and couldn't even imagine what has to be done to change it. We showed them it doesn't have to be done too much to really change it. And then we invited kids and politicians. That's, I think, the most important group of people. You know, the one with the power and the responsibility, and the one with the creativity. And this is the Children Forum organized by the City Council, and we invite them to organize it on that space we changed. So it was the opening, and they came and they discussed, and it was a big experience for them, influenced by the place. Listen to the crowd. It's about believing that you are not the one who knows everything, and the crowd is usually smarter. So do listen to the crowds, and you will get the best ideas for solutions of any kind. And this is they call it Sandri board. It's a board of experts, which the mayor of the city has as a board for, you know, for discussion several topics about urbanism and city development. So they are quite important people sitting on that space on the suburb area. And it was raining, so everyone was sitting together, you know, and it made it even stronger and better. And the ideas were better then. Play with the people. It's just a general idea, but it works. This is the borough city councillor with his. No, it's not his daughter. It's a lector, but anyway. And he was playing and drawing like crazy, and he was, you know, so excited about it that then he became our partner at the moment. And yeah, belief in local culture. I mean, it's just it's there in localities. There is a big there is a local culture, and you need to see it there, but on the metropolitan level as well. It's really important for the metropole as a whole, and you have to understand that, and you have to believe it, not only say it, but really believe it. And then you can build the trust with the others. It's a long process, but you have to hang on it and hold on it and really believe in that trust of the others. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Then this is the conclusion. That's the words in one place. So write it down.
Thank you, David. Fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed it. And we have a last panelist here, and that's Ragnar Sila from Estonia. And he's currently head of a European Union expert group on cultural and creative industries. It is very difficult to always know what does it mean and how you do it, you know, in this organization, because it's sometimes very non-transparent, you know. So we'll be all kind of waiting what you're going to say. Tell us more about this institution and how you're doing there.
Good. Děkuji, dobrý den. I'm going to sit down, because then I'm going to be the first one sitting down today. The second good news is that, well, I have 1 million slides. I'm not going to show any of them, okay? I was trying to calculate how many pictures of buildings we've seen today. I think on average, we've seen around 200 to 250 buildings. And I was thinking, people, if I would be you and if I would be listening to all these fantastic presentations today from Barcelona to US, from Netherlands to UK, the first question I would have in my mind is, well, good luck for you, but, you know, we are Czech Republic, you know, what can we do? I'm from Estonia, we're small, 1 million, we are, well, poorer than most of these countries of examples today. My point is that it's possible even in our countries, okay? So that's my first point. I have a couple of hats in my head. For the past 9 years, I was a civil servant. I was working in the government. So I've looked all of these issues that have been talked today from the government point of view. I've always been reminded by something that a great scholar from UK, Kate Oakley, said once. She said that governments, city governments, national governments, doesn't matter, around the world have become very, very, very good in noticing or finding out where the talent is attracted in their city or in their country. Okay, so they see what are the places where all the creative people come to, and they are very, very good in rushing and helping and supporting and trying to do something about it, designating culture areas. However, what Kate Oakley also says is that almost nowhere in the world the governments have managed to create those areas by themselves. Okay? So if you agree with Kate Oakley, and I do, then the first lesson for the governments around the world is just open your eyes and look and listen. I know many, many failed experiences when the government has a good idea to create a creative area, creative quarter, hub, or a place or a factory in a place that no creative ever wants to go to. Okay? And then in next building there is really a creative people, creatives gathering. It's like a magnet, and there's no interest from the government to support that. So I think that's the very first mistake. In Estonia, like in everywhere in the world at the moment, there's absolutely a boom in creative places. They are emerging like mushrooms after the rain. What has happened in Estonia, in Tallinn, for example, in the city that I come from, and that was also in 2011 the culture capital of Europe, I think there's three important things that support this kind of a movement. The first thing that really, really drives this is the emergence of creative industries, the awareness of creative businesses. Only in the last 4 years, the years of crisis from 2007 to 2011, the number of creative businesses in Estonia went up 44%. Okay? 4-4. That means there's more than ever the need, the demand from the creative sectors, the businesses, for places like this. And as you know from creatives and creative businesses, they want to work together. They are naturally clustering. Okay, so that's something natural for that sector. So that's the first thing that has happened. The second thing that has happened that was very, very good for creative placemaking was the economic crisis. There were so many developments stopped in 2007 and 2008. And that was a blessing for culture. Many of those areas are now still underdeveloped by the views of developers, but actually booming as creative quarters. Actually, there's a very good example from Riga, from Latvia. Latvia was the country that probably in Europe suffered the most, well, maybe compared to Greece. And there were many, many shops that went bankrupt in 2007 and 8 and 9. And what the city did, together with banks and private contributors, they actually did a program where culture creative companies could take on the empty shops. Okay? So they were basically given shops because the city said it's very ugly and demotivating to have lots of closed windows. So let them be something creative inside. And the third, I think, critical aspect is the strengthening of the local identity, this community spirit. This was the key for Tallinn Culture Capital. It's not about the big events. It's not about opening huge opera houses. It's about empowering those small communities. Something that 10 years ago did not exist in Estonia, now is absolutely present and extremely visible. I could name you around 10 these local communities of physical areas in cities which have very strong identity. They have their own festivals. They do some social health, even healthcare. They do some childcare. They are organizing their cafeterias. They have these joint eatings where they put, a kilometer-long table to eat all around one table and things like that. I could name around 10 creative areas that have recent years been popped out in Tallinn. 10 creative clusters. By saying that, I don't mean a single building. I mean a cluster of buildings, areas, companies supporting services. Now, out of those 10, I was just making a calculation. One of those 10 that have been really created in the last 5-6 years, not more. One is fully publicly funded. One is partially funded by public money. The third one is public-private partnership. And the 7 has not received and not asked a single euro for development. So when we talked before here, is it about public money, is it about private money? Actually, in a small country of 1 million, of a small city of 450,000 people, it makes economically sense for the private entrepreneurs and private investors to launch these kind of areas. And the last thing I want to just to finish up, just a small story of one of those factories. Doesn't matter, you can picture any of the pictures that you've already seen today. So there is this factory, and I lived next to it, so I took it very personally. It's a historic factory of 100 years. It used to be in the Tsar times a factory for building railways, and then it was very famous factory because this was the factory where Mikhail Kalinin worked early last century. Kalinin was a long-time Soviet Union president, and if you don't know anything else, you know Kaliningrad. Now, during the Soviet times, this was a secret factory because they produced secret elements for rockets and atomic energy and space programs, okay? So on the maps, it didn't exist. That means there was absolutely no way that people could ever go to that area. That was sealed off area. By the early 2000s, this was a really nightmare place, something that we saw in one of the last slides. When you walked by, when you didn't get beaten up, you were lucky. You always found needles on the ground and people with drug addicts and all of these kind of things. There was only one small beacon of light. Because every night that I passed this very ugly place, it is a huge area, there was one broken window, and every night from that window there was music coming out. Okay? So basically the underground bands in Estonia, in Tallinn, squatted the place and used this as a rehearsing studio. Okay? Now, what was interesting was that the people started to notice this, and more of underground culture people went there. By 2008, there was planned to take everything down. The tractor or the machine to take the buildings down was already on the spot, and basically the machine was started, and then the crisis hit and everything was stopped. Thanks God. And now if everything is stopped, then the way that, in my view, the real estate developers work is that, the first thing is that take this down and build something more productive instead. Now, if the economic environment doesn't allow you to build something new, then you have nothing better to do. Yes, you have nothing better to do, and basically if you are culturally minded real estate developer, you would say, use it. Use it as long as, we have a better plan. And that was what happened with this factory. So suddenly they gave rooms for creative businesses, they gave room for flea markets and things like that. And suddenly people started to go. Suddenly the real estate developers understood, wait a minute, the cultural activity that is happening here actually rehearses people to go to that area. Meaning that if I plan in the future to build apartments here, actually the culture component here increases the value of the property. Okay, so then suddenly they start to support this kind of a movement more and more. By the way, this is a very tricky thing because by the end of the process, they've lost the control over it. It's such a living space at the moment that there is absolutely no way that the real estate developers could stop it and say that we're going to take it down anyway. By the way, the real estate developers of that creative area sold it because they knew that it will never be turned into apartment buildings. And now this is one of the most viable, living and creative areas of Tallinn. But more to come later. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This is what we really needed, this kind of energetic approach. I think this is really suitable for our debate because we really need that energy. And I think what's amazing about what you just said, that the power of storytelling. It's something what really works, you know. If you really have this ability to share something what is personal, and there is that transformational energy in it, you know, that's something what it really works. I think you don't need to, you know, just to tell things in a complex way, you know. This is the best way how you can inspire others, you know. And I think that this is a fantastic, actually, aspect of placemaking that, you know, it's actually addictive. You know, that all these stories are incredibly addictive. And I think that they work. So I would like to just inspire a little bit for our debate, you know, talk more and be more interactive in terms of our topic. So I just give you one more question, Ragnar. Should I start with you? So I'll give you just one question each, but I would invite you just to join if you feel. So I don't know if the microphones are working, so can we just test them? So, does everybody have a microphone? So you can share, okay. So Ragnar, you work for European Union, and then we all, and particularly because I work in the UK, they just, you know, they always like, oh, what are they doing there? All these bureaucrats. So, and it's always a bit of a question, you know, like how do you manage actually get the data and information from creative businesses? Because it's a huge task, you know, because usually, as we know, that all these institutions are a bit slow. They're a little bit, you know, 2 steps behind, you know. The creative industries are always ahead. They are always like pushing it. So how do you actually communicate? How do you then kind of use that knowledge, and how do you transfer it into the policies?
So it's a very good question. As I said, I have, I had for many years 2 hats. One was the government hat of Estonia, where I was the State Secretary for the Arts, and then I was at the same time running or managing the European Union Creative Industries Working Group in Brussels. And the answer to your question is that as Brussels is concerned, this is impossible, and that's why I never went to work full-time in Brussels. I love working in a small country. Well, it's fantastic to work in a village. It's absolutely amazing. First of all, when I was the State Secretary for the Arts and I said, I want to meet with the sector, I physically could meet with the sector. I physically could have everybody, all the theater people in the room and talk to them. That also means that you can have very quick reaction from a small country like Estonia. We also have very, very good way to monitor, to map the problems, the situation. Estonia is one of the few countries in Europe that is actually regularly mapping and looking at the tendencies of what's happening. So
how do you do it? You know, because this is something.
Yes, but you call everyone. Yeah.
So it's just interaction.
You shout out of the window. You know, it's possible. But it's true. Estonia has been quite a successful story when it comes to creative industries, precisely because this can be a test ground. It's a laboratory. We can test things because everything moves very quickly. Everything can be, you see the result of your activity. And to add into that Estonian pot, of course, Estonian most important element, that makes it very easy is our digital government. You know, the Estonia with the Skype, you know, Skype comes from Estonia. We vote on internet in our parliamentary elections. We can make a company in Estonia without any capital in no more than 5 minutes using template on the web, etc. So making company, making business, reporting on your business, paying taxes, it's extremely, extremely easy in a country, and that also contributes to this kind of very, very simple environment.
So not everything is about money, no? This is about really passionate vision. It's about that Estonia as a small country, you know, because sometimes you say like, how do they sustain, you know, like as a small country? But this is really about vision, about something what is energetic, and it goes deep into the society. So, and I just want to ask David, you know, that because you have a probably similar experience here, and you know, with the authorities, and probably that's a big topic here. You know, how do you communicate with them? How do you actually, you know, convince them about like, so this is the thing which is really needed. So it's not just some kind of crazy transport projects and I don't know, some wastage of money. You know, I mean, like, how do you do that? How do you actually say this has a value?
Yeah. Yes, it's not easy question, but I'm lucky because as Ragnar, the area where I work for at the Prague district, Prague 14, borough number 14, there was it's a laboratory in a way as well, because there is a very wise mayor, and there is no arts council or arts office, and I am a director of a budgetary arts organization. So I'm free in what I do. And I have a full trust of the mayor, because we became a very good friends in a while, because he had a vision and I agreed with his vision, and I can help him to fulfill, and I have a, how do you call it, zadání, how do you call it?
Brief.
A brief, yes. Yeah. I got a very, very, very easy and very well understood brief, and that's what's our communication based on. I know what to do, and he trusts me, and then I can and we can do very fast changes. So you
spend a lot of time on actually developing the brief, because that's the most important word.
Well,
you know, because if the brief is wrong,
the brief was the brief. It was a vision. The vision was the brief, and the brief was very simple. He said, "I want this area with full of people who like to live here and who are active with in her lives." And that's enough for me, you know. And then I can find tools as a culture manager how to help to fill this, also a strategy, etc. It's not me doing everything, of course. I'm the coordinator of the process, but I have the vision, and without the vision, without the brief, the communication is very hard, because then there's lots of misunderstandings, you know.
But isn't it that the process of placemaking has almost like two parts? The first one is like changing the mind, and the second part is that the physical transformations. The first one is more like, again, psychological, where you have to massage people to actually to understand and be part of something. And the second thing is that the real transformation, which is not the real one, but I mean the physical one. Of course, it is not a linear process, you know, they could kind of overlay these two periods, but I think that from my experience working with the projects here in Czech Republic or Slovakia, I think the first part is the most difficult one.
And it's and without changing people's mind and people's approach, and it's about it's about not only informing but sharing. It's not only about hearing but listening. It's not only, you know, that's just a mind switch. It's not about fighting. It can be about fighting, but about cooperating, etc. And it really needs to be a mind switch of the politicians, of all the people, not only politicians, but also that's considering the arts people as well, and that's important. And the other part, it's hard work, and you have to give it a time, and you have to be there. You have to be there for the people, because if you are not there the next day, you will lose the trust, you know, I was talking about. So it's really it needs a lot of effort.
It's amazing that when I heard first time the word placemaking was actually in a connection to artist group, which was I think that because I was looking at it, you know, like, what is this word, you know? And then actually it was an artist group which I think that it started functioning in 60s and 70s. And it was actually, and I was very surprised by that because I thought placemaking is a kind of must be a domain of some designers or architects. But again, it was artists, and I think the artists are the ones who actually are very sensitive to changes. And that was exactly the time when the car culture kind of exploded. You know, and that day there was their reaction to, I mean, a very natural reaction to something what was going very wrong, particularly in American cities. So, so same thing, you know, that artists are in the forefront. You know, they are really this I would say, they're very sensitive to the changes, and then they can answer the questions in a very simple way. So because usually, you know, the architects or planners, they always make something kind of mess out of everything, you know. But I mean, artists are very good, you know, at just, you know, pointing to the right thing.
A short note to it. Sorry, may I? Or it was okay. No, I'll tell later. Go on.
So.
Actually, I'd like to just change the conversation a little and say that I feel like there's a tremendous tension in what the last four of us have said anyway, that two people here are talking about coming from outside a community and identifying some kind of creative placemaking opportunity and then trying to work with people and convince them. And in a way, what Ragnar described and what all of our case studies end up being, and we didn't design them that way, they were all started by somebody within the community, and mostly they were artists, and that meant that there was an incredible staying power to them because people themselves inside the community had started them. They had figured out how to make partners. They had figured out how to reach out outside for the resources they meant. And I just would like, you know, everybody to speak to that because I feel that this is really, you know, a very fundamental thing to think about. And I do really worry about cases where people come in from outside, and I don't mean that they're not really skilled and well-intentioned, have great techniques that I probably don't know about, but what happens afterwards when you go and you develop the particular thing, and then who's going to carry it on if it wasn't really the passion and the vision and idea of somebody within the community that started it?
That's a very good point, because if you look at all these examples, you know, of this iconic approach, you know, that there were only the outsiders called, you know, to do these kind of iconic buildings or kind of gymnastics, you know, which they were hoping that it will enable the process of cultural change. But most of them are not working very well. Maybe I'm not right, but that's my observation. So I think maybe the answer is in a combination. So we can't just say that the outsiders are not welcome, but I think that I don't believe that this kind of saying that the outsider can bring something completely fresh without any contextual thinking. And I think that it's very important to know what's local, and I think we need to really just go back to that and start to appreciate it.
So I'd like to, I mean, this I think is part of the heart of a lot of these issues that were talked about this morning, with the example with the squatters in Amsterdam, with the call of saying artists should be city makers. You know, that's like this, there's I think maybe three things going on here. So one is like the question of disciplines, you know, of are we only, you know, either or are we more complex, multicultural, multidiscipline beings? You know, this idea of specialization only happened after World War II. It's a very recent idea that you couldn't have multiple interests and be legitimate or sincere in them. The other thing I think that's going on is my background is in anthropology, so I'm biased to really get into the cultural dynamics, but there are certain things that outsiders can say that they can help begin a discussion that insiders to a community feel that they can't say or are maybe not aware of because they're so inside it. So but the outsider has to treat each community as if it's a sacred place. You know, I forget where the quote came from, but you know, I think one of the good mental models is there are no non-sacred places. The world is sacred, or it has been desecrated. And so there's this respect, I think, that we need to develop with how we relate to each other. So if you're an outsider, and like when I'm doing a project in Colombia, which is what this exhibit is in process about here on the ramp, in Cali, which is the third largest city, it's about 2 million people. Now I'm half Colombian, and my other side of the family is Norwegian American. And so even though I'm half Colombian, I get some access to the local culture, but it still is like what I was mentioning earlier. It's like, what is your destiny? What is your passion? What are your dreams? That's what matters. And my approach is, as an outsider, is you want to listen to that and help facilitate maybe some new territory or some political passion. But there's the whole idea in international development of like being a parachute problem solver. You know, you drop in, you act like a savior, and then you leave, and then basically there's been no knowledge transfer. There's, if anything, a dependency, a short-term dependency that was created. So I think, and this is the problem that happens on a micro level within a city. If you're on one side of the city, you go to the other side, the same dynamic happens. So there's those nuances there that I think are really important to understand that, you know, a new voice in a community 10 years later is a native voice, because we also move around into different neighborhoods. So there's this, how do we be open and pluralistic while also respecting hyper-local tradition? And there should always be a tension.
And so one more thing what I just point out is that also it's important to keep the continuity. So just maybe, you know, when you start something or just you see the process at the beginning, you have to maybe sometimes let it go a little bit. Just don't control it, don't try to kind of plan it too much, because I think it's just too much control. It always, you know, just messes it up. So I think that in many ways, if there is an outsider involved, you know, it should be more like somebody inspires the local people. And they can take over. They can do their own things because they do understand. But he shouldn't be the guy telling them what to do, you know. So it should be more like inspirator, you know, somebody who comes there and just gives them tools and tell them and gives them a bit of advice. But it is always tricky, you know, as an outsider to work with the community.
How many people here are familiar with the idea of tactical urbanism? If you could raise your hand. Tactical urbanism. No, okay. So it's this. I kind of feel that what you were talking about was just acting to kind of activate. So it's this idea of doing an agile or an iterative intervention, and best, of course, when it's done with the community's wishes in mind. But sometimes what I've observed is, you know, every city is not the same. Some cities have deep apathy or cynicism, and I think that's where, when you're in those communities, sometimes you just need to not talk, you need to do. There's actually this famous story about a community in London after World War II, where it was a poor community and these artists were brought in to help help restore the community. And there was so much tension and probably post-traumatic stress disorder. So what they did is they had a participatory design process in this neighborhood, but no one could use words. So everyone had to just do something and respond. So it became very intimate, but also when someone didn't like something, you felt it, because it was very much using body knowledge, which speaks much more than words ever will. So there is this there's something valuable to just doing something, but again, it has to be acknowledging this sort of sacred dimension, which I think that's also, I think, probably what you were talking about to some degree.
This sometimes points into the branding as well, you know, that because the branding is quite a tricky, I would say, territory. That how do you actually brand the city? Because you know it very well, and you need to know it. You know, it's not just. And other thing, what I want to ask you is how you. Because the brand is something what is more like a static thing, you know, it's just kind of like it's there and everybody remembers it. But cities are constantly evolving. They're changing. They are some very organic. So you have to evaluate that brand. You know, you have to go back to the cities and kind of like change it a little bit or tweak it. You know, so maybe there are two parallel processes there.
Yep. I would say that the brand is a very dynamic thing. It's not static at all. So when I talk about my presentation, I just talk about the brand as a macro perception of the city. But I think what we are talking here is that we need to, I think very good presentations, that we need to understand actually what's going on physically and socially in the city. And that's something that sometimes doesn't happen quite often when we think about the city administration. For example, we did a project in Barcelona. It's called Epidermis, which means we try to understand every single neighborhood in 3 dimensions. People who is living there, because let's call consumption, what do they do? What their activities, what the content? And the physical, the environmental, where do they go? Where do they meet? Where do they relate? And trying to understand the trends in every single neighborhood. I think unless you go to this micro level, because I think most of the initiatives come from the communities, and as in the last presentation said, that I think most of them, or like creative people, tend to cluster themselves. I mean, you cannot create creative clusters or areas. I think Barcelona is a good example. It's a very compact city. I think we need to understand what's going on, what are the trends. Then we can just put this to the top and understand what's the main brand or ideas for the city, but also for each of even different neighborhoods. I think New York is a very good example. We have brands within the brand of New York. I think Brooklyn has changed completely, many areas, but they have changed naturally, which I think is what we have to understand. And I think the role of the city council is basically to act as an inspirator or facilitator, I would say. And sometimes, as you were saying, it is different between different neighborhoods and different areas. Sometimes you have to be more active or proactive. Some other times you have to just let things go and help them go. I think, but unless you do this kind of research, which is not very common for my experience, you cannot get the pulse of the city. And also with the planning. I think the planning is absolutely a mess, because most of the time there's an urban planning, there's an economic planning, there's a cultural planning somehow, and there is no way to, and there is someone talking on the brand, basically on the communication department. So unless we have this whole view integrated, it's very difficult to think about the branding or the placemaking in general.
I'll give a word to Ragnar. Is it possible that a city kind of becomes a victim of its own brand?
Yes, of course.
Because that's how I feel sometimes, they just invent something and then, they just stick to it. And actually, it's a bit of misleading concept.
I think sometimes if you focus the brand or the perception in just one single aspect, it can be dangerous, because then it's very difficult to change to another. I think Barcelona, it can be a very good example. It's a tourist destination. It's a great destination. So we're struggling to also to become a business or an entrepreneurial destination. But it's so strong focus on enjoy, quality of life, vacation, and can be very dangerous. I think sometimes the problem with strong brands, which are sometimes more focus on one aspect of the brand, can have a problem. I think sometimes I say the problem of Barcelona is the brand of Barcelona. So sometimes you need to think again about the brand and how can you do to make it more polyhedric, let's call it this way. Yeah.
I think we've been discussing this issue now, what Anne very well and clearly brought out. Maybe a bit too theoretically, very, very pragmatically. Let's think about this. So the point is that you have a city government or groups of city officers sitting around a table. There's no one from culture sector. And they look at the map and say, here we have a city factory, a factory belonging to the city, standing empty. We have nothing else to do. Somebody has read a book, maybe Anne's book, and said, oh, let's put a culture factory in there. Yeah? And then decide it, and then they go to the sector to sell the idea. Now, that was what I was talking about. In my experience, it might happen, but I've never seen it happening successfully. Okay? Now, very shortly, when everybody's now creating creative incubators. Okay? Incubator, it's a term that is quite vague, but let it be there. creative incubator. And you could say that there's basically 3 options you can do this. The first option that I can bring many examples would be like this. There's a city government's economic department understanding finally that creative business and creative industries need such a support mechanism. Fantastic. So they decide, there's a house, let's create the incubator, let's create an organization on top of it, and let's make a call, and let's try to find incubants in the incubator. Yeah? Already a model for disaster. No? And then they are surprised, why don't they come, and why don't these people come that we really want? The second option is that they have the building, they decide they want incubator, they make a decision, they bring the culture people on board to actually discuss with them what it should be like, what kind of focus areas, what kind of priorities, what kind of program. Much better, much better. But there's even better way, and this is, Estonia has many very bad examples, but this was a very good example. The Tallinn city government in 2007 and 2008 decided that they need a creative incubator. So the way they worked is that before they had any idea where they could go, no building in sight, they brought the possible clients, the future incubants, to the council. So they had a group of 30 people, and they basically did what kindergartens are doing. They took these 30 people, and they started to walk from place to place to find the right place. They found a place that majority, 28 out of 30 were happy. And then they decided, here we're going to do it, okay? Building started, 1, 2, 3, 4 months, a problem. This didn't work out. They took all the 30 again, physically by hand. They walked around. They found a second one. By the way, what did this exercise show? They showed that there were, and we had absolutely no idea, there were invisible lines in the city, invisible streets, that people said, if you cross the street, there's one main, if you are going to open an incubator or a hub on the other side of that street, we are not interested. Okay? By the end of the day, they had to go across the street. They went and they lost 15 of those 30. It's a good story still, because they found another 15 that would be interested in that area, and the rest of the 15 that were not happy did their own hub. So win-win-win situation. But the point is that without actually working from the very beginning, holding hand, you would have made such a mistake by thinking that you have the 30 and your business plan runs, and actually you made a mistake. So just to make it very practical example how this works.
I have a story too. How we are, as a culture manager in the locality, how was I filling the vision of the mayor to make the people be happy with their lives? And what we start with was the community monitoring. I was talking about it. We really had a idea what communities live in the area. And there was one with the, I don't know how to call the sport. It's nohejbal. It's a Czech specialty. It's like tennis with the ball. You know, you kick over the net with the football, but it's like tennis rules. And there was this community, and they had a team, and they were they were meisters of Czech Republic in old 70s.
Sorry, you play tennis with it?
Well, with the football. I'll show you, and it's very fun. And there is the contests, you know, like a national contest. There is a contest, and they were the winners in the Czech Republic.
Our imagination worked on this one really
yeah.
now.
And there's even a girls' team on it. You know, it's also, and they won in the 70s, and then they quit. You know, and then they still are together, and they go for the beer, but they don't play anymore because there is no playground. Well, the old one is there still, but well. So that's how because we with the anthropologists, with the culture, we did the community monitoring. So they actually met them in the pub and discussed the problem. And we, as an authority, as an institution, came to them and said, well, what about playing the game again? What about we can help you to get the money from the council and from the municipality, and we can help you. We can borrow you some tools to manage, and they will say, okay, we'll go for it. And then they organize with our help the how do you call it, the competition of this game, and we print them out some pictures from the old times. We place it on the fences all over, and the most important thing about the process was then that we kind of helped them to get the idea that there is support from the municipality. They can do it by themselves, and now they are doing it by themselves from that point, and we can help to raise the tradition again, and that I see that's what the role of the cultural manager in a locality should be, to really be able to find the dots, and then help them to become the reality.
I think we are running out of time, so I think it would be good to switch to questions from the audience. So if there are any questions, please just ask. How does it work? Are you going to bring okay.
Děkuju. Freiberg galerie, nashledanou. Já bych se chtěl zeptat...
Can you just hold on? So we need it's in chat. Sorry.
Dobrý den, Freiberg galerie, nashledanou. Já bych se chtěl zeptat na smysl změny, která vznikne tím, že lidé místo toho, aby pracovali v továrnách, budou pracovat v zábavním průmyslu. Co vlastně jako to společnosti jakoby přinese, v čem je teda ta revoluce, kterou tady děláme? Děkuju.
I'll take a chance.
Good luck.
So I think what he may be talking about is sort of the idea of the creative class and the language that Richard Florida has developed, which is, of course, coming out of the United States, which has decimated its industrial capacity and outsourced it through neoliberal globalization, which, as we now see, since 2008, has it's sort of a shell game that has run its course, perhaps. So this is why a lot of people now are referring to the current moment that we're in as this sort of post-capitalist moment, where people are starting to become allergic to the neoliberal Bible. So that is, I would say, at least within there's a segment of radical urbanism that very much is against the sort of the smart city, the service city, this creative class, which has with it a lot of political ideology that in many ways can work against communities from being resilient, from being self-sufficient, and being authentic in all of their ways. Whenever I go to visit Colombia, for example, everything is made in Colombia. All the food, almost everything, except for computers, but it seems like everything that's good, it's organic, it's local. I know that I'm in Colombia because I'm eating it and breathing it. Here, I feel like I'm in the region. A lot of the food and everything is very regional. And so I know I'm in this place. I can't be anywhere else. If you go to a lot of the cities in the United States where there's a sort of belief or mantra in creative class, it's the same hipster pattern, and it almost seems placeless. So that is a very important, deep question. And I would say, to me, the answer is, what is the check answer to this balance between the running away from two economic systems that we all, I think, are beginning to realize doesn't work? So what is What are the new models? And perhaps that could be invented here. If not here, where else?
Could I say something about that? First of all, I want to say that, you know, as somebody who fought for 7 years in the Midwest to keep, which we kept a steel mill open in Chicago for another 7 years after it was announced it was closed, I want to say that manufacturing isn't dead in the United States. We still have the same level of output. It's just that it's been so mechanized and it has been internationalized, but we have managed to maintain a fairly large working class. But I think the more important thing is really related to what you've said. There is a maker's movement. There is a movement on the part of many people, even in small little towns, to grow our own food, to share, to barter with each other over, you know, from the skills that we have. My son runs a small manufacturing firm in New York. Yes, it's all computer-aided design. It's all one-off. 8 young men he employs working basically on machines. And there are many, many people working on food, on environmental issues. There just is a fair amount of it. I'm really skeptical that we'll get rid of capitalism. I think that the increasing inequality of wealth and income is a huge, huge problem that we haven't even really talked about. What could arts and culture do about that? I think there are some things. So I think that it's really important to keep a focus on that, because a lot of the problems we're having politically, we just lost our Congress to the Republicans, comes from the disaffection of people who are not in the creative class, which I don't believe in, but the whole rubric, the Florida rubric, but more importantly, in this incredibly, you know, debilitating concentration of wealth and income worldwide without even a feeling for, you know, what happens in the country anymore. So thank you for the question.
Any more questions?
Could I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
It's really, this morning somebody asked about rural areas, and I think this is particularly important given this question about outsiders and insiders. So in our creative placemaking study, we had 15 case studies. 2 of them are from very, very small rural places. One is a Native American reservation where the manager of a whole healthcare and social services complex decided that art is a part of healing, and he patronizes only living Ojibwa artists' work, and he has created a market for them. And in every single room in this complex, there is some beautiful work of Native American art that helps people in these communities heal. And the other is an amazing young visual artist who moved back to a small town in Louisiana, and he realized that it was all crack houses and going downhill. He made a commitment to staying there for the rest of his life. He saw that Cajun culture, Cajun music, and French language, that there were both Arcadian people that spoke French and Creole people that came through the West Indies, former slaves that spoke French, and that he could build French language tables, and that eventually they caught the attention of the French attaché in New Orleans. They took them to Brittany, where they were working on similar things. Now they are converting their shuttered 1960s small hospital into a French language immersion school. And it's just an amazing example, again, where one artist who was from the community made a commitment to staying there and knew how to work with people and worked very slowly with the politicians and the naysayers in the community to create something really quite extraordinary.
So please don't be shy, just ask. Okay.
Já jsem se chtěla zeptat, a vlastně jste mě odpověděli teď už. Placemaking je obrovská revoluce, ale mluvíte jenom o velkých městech. Jak ho dělat na venkově? Dřív zřejmě, ale to patří do středověku, na starém dobrém českém venkově byl placemaking na návsi, ale teď už to neplatí. Je to o obrovské osvětě starostů, o motivaci, o školách. Já jsem 15 let starostovala, tak vím, o čem mluvím. Je třeba mluvit se starosty.
I think one other, to the point about dealing with the different scales of cities. So I think one of the things that came up today were, you know, New York, London, even Barcelona, I would say, are luxury cities. So they have a very different set of problems politically. And even in some ways, New York, what's been happening is not organic. It's been a planned attack by real estate exploitation to a large degree. And London, I think, has been suffering some of the same things there
Even
too.
worse.
But, you know, in the rural places or in industrial, former industrial cities, smaller cities, you want a certain type of gentrification or development, these local economies. We don't have the language. I think part of the problem, you know, like Slavoj Žižek says that one of our problems that we have is we don't even have the vocabulary to articulate the problems that we have right now. So, for example, there's urban design, but there isn't really an equivalent discourse or field of study that would be called rural design. So, but as a resource, and I mentioned this to the woman who asked this morning, I worked on a project with the National Endowment for the Arts on what is now called the Citizens Institute for Rural Design, and that's at rural-design.org. So that has dozens of stories and resources for smaller towns, like 50,000 people and less is the sort of target. But in the US, for example, that's half of the population lives in a rural environment, or slightly less than half. So it is not trivial.
Short note, I think it's about school, church, and the pub, you know, no matter if it's a small town or village or a huge municipality. It's just these three: education, culture, and communities.
So I think we run out of time. So thank you very much for your contribution and thoughts. And I think again, thank you very much for listening us. And I hope that the conversation will continue, because as I know how the conferences work, you know, the best part is like after we kind of disappear from the stage and we start talking more informally to individuals. So I invite everyone just to talk and think more about placemaking, because I think placemaking is still very open territory. It's a huge universe, and I think all of us here, we still don't know what it is, you know. So we kind of like, and because we don't know, it's more exciting. So So I invite everyone just to contribute to this placemaking debate. Thank you very much for listening to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Igor, for inviting us to continue creative placemaking discussions. We have the best chance to do it right away because we continue our program in Plzeň this evening, where we have a concert and power presentations of creative placemaking projects. We also have expert sessions tomorrow also in Plzeň. Those of you who registered for those parts of the program, you probably already know how to get there. If you are using our buses, you know where they go from. Where to get them. I would like to thank all the panelists for their contributions. I think the bottom line is that we have the power and the obligation to start the change with us and with our environment. Thank you again.